Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another exciting JLI course. This one is called Decisions of Faith, where we will be discussing matters of medical ethics from a Jewish perspective. Medicine and Judaism has always gone, since, time where we're going to go through a little bit of the history, of it, but it's always been very important because we Jews love life. We love life. We love living. People don't understand that, but we do. We just love it. As a matter of fact, one of the questions that people have pondered for ages, and won't go into it in this class, maybe one of the classes down the line, is when does life actually begin? It's been a big question here in America. When does life begin? So, they brought it up in front of Congress, and they invited three of the most eminent religious thinkers in this country, a Protestant, a Catholic, and a Jew. And they asked a Catholic priest, they said, "Father, when does life begin?" And he says, according to Catholic doctrine, at conception. That's it, it's conception. And then they asked the Protestant minister, they said, "Minister, when does life begin?" He says, according to Protestantism, the first trimester, so around there. And then they asked the rabbi, in Judaism, when does life begin? And he says, life begins when the kids are married and the dog dies. That's when life begins. Okay, it's an oldest joke in the book, but it's what we call an oldie but goodie. You can tell it. You can tell it a million times. It's the same, but it just emphasizes the idea that we Jews love life, and we will do anything to preserve that. So So that's what we're going to be studying for the next 4 weeks. This is a four course. Okay, so this course is going to be about experimental treatments. Meaning that, if you have a cough due to cold, you go to your doctor, he'll give you a medication, you'll take it. Hopefully a couple of days later, you're back in shape. God forbid you break your arm, you go to the doctor, it sets a cast, your arm is going to feel better. Most of the time, all right? But now, thank God with medical science, we're at the cutting edge of, so many new, not only on the illness side of it, but also on the recovery side of it, so many treatments. So that's what we're going to be concentrating tonight, how far, what, when, and where we are able to take advantage of these experimental treatments. So we're going to start off with a case study. Okay, the case study is a serious one. It's a sad one. And we're not going to go through the whole thing. It's like 3 pages in the book, but I'm just going to cut it short for everybody out there in the Facebook world. It goes something like this. There was this little girl that was born. The parents, and at birth, she seemed like a very, healthy, natural, beautiful little girl. But as time went on, she had very difficult time walking. She wasn't walking. Now her mother was a pediatrician, so she took her to testing, and they said, look, some kids develop walking later. Give her physical therapy, and she'll develop it. And at first it helped. So she went, but then all of a sudden again she regressed, and she got very sick. So they went to other doctors, and they took an MRI, and they discovered that she has, now pardon me, thank God we have with us tonight Dr. Lenny Lovich, an eminent physician, so he's going to help us out on this. Surgeon, okay? Not to be confused with a psychiatrist. That's what he's saying. Okay, absolutely not. My brother-in-law was a surgeon, same way. Surgeon, not just a doctor. But she ended up with metachromatic leukodystrophy. Metachromatic leukodystrophy. Now, this is a disease that you die. This is basically everything. It's fatal. Everything breaks down, and that usually it's about 8 years old that you die. You slowly digress, and then there's some treatment, but the treatment will stop it for a little bit, but then eventually you go into a vegetative state, and the average age of passing is 8 years old. Now, both parents, I believe, it doesn't say, but I believe the father was also a physician, so you have two parents that are doctors. Right. This little girl, is now diagnosed with this horrible, terrible, disease. So the father throws himself full force into trying to see what he can do. And he finds out that this company, Shire Pharmaceuticals, it's a huge pharmaceutical company, has already developed a therapy for this disease, and even have found a way to deliver it across blood-brain barriers, which is by no mean feat this. Okay, what the problem is, of course, that's not FDA approved. I mean, this is a therapy that studies have been done, phase 1 in Europe. In Europe, phase 1. But it showed positive signs. So what does he do? He tries to get them to allow them under this thing that is called compassionate use, right to try, because, the little girl has got this quote unquote death sentence, on her. They've tried everything and now he's at wit's end. So he wants them to release this drug to her and under this idea of this compassionate use. Now this we'll see how it plays along, this thing. Okay, now how does this thing work? Now how does it work? It means you petition your physicians and say, hey, you know what, you've seen, the physicians all agree that this is it. They then petition the FDA, and the FDA generally approves 95% of all what did we say? Compassionate use, they approve, usually in a few days. If the physicians agree and your physician sends in a request, what does the FDA have to lose? And here's where the problem happens. The pharmaceuticals don't have to comply. They don't have to comply. So this is what happened with him. He got FDA approval. They told him go, and he contracted Shire Pharmaceuticals, explained the situation, and they refused. They refused him. And he kept begging, and they refused him to the point where they said, and I'll explain why, and they refused him to the point that they wouldn't even communicate with him. They said, we're not communicating with you. You communicate with your personal physician. There's nothing more that we want to do. So, of course, he was extremely, disappointed, and, now we don't know what happened to this little girl, but this is the case. Now, the former president passed a law, while he was president, that you don't have to go anymore to the FDA. You can petition directly to the pharmaceutical companies. He cut out that part of it, that formality. What do you have to go to the FDA? I mean, they haven't anyways approved this treatment. You can go directly to the pharmaceuticals. But here's where the cruel joke comes. So you finally get approval from your physicians. Now, you have to have physician approval. You just can't come as a parent. You have to have physician approval. You have to send it over to the pharmaceuticals. And the law has not forced them to release these drugs. Has not forced them to release these drugs. So this is what they would call the cruel joke. Because you're finally getting to the spot where you think that you have some kind of hope, and they block you. They block you. Now, I don't have exactly the statistics for how many times they approve or disapprove, but I'll tell you what the problem is. The problem is why pharmaceuticals are very reluctant to release these drugs, because they're not really tested. I mean, yes, you may have gone through some testing in Europe. They may show signs, but what happens here, and this is what the pharmaceuticals are worried about, you'll allow the therapy to take place and the patient dies. And then what happens? Then all of a sudden, even if you sign a release, you'll sign a release that, look, this is our last shot. This is like a Hail Mary. We try anything. Fine. Even if that happens, what's going to happen? They're going to investigate, and they're going to show you that the reason why she died was due to this drug. Even if it smells that way, even if it wasn't the cause, so she could have lived, let's say she was 6 years old right now, okay? And she could have, let's say, made it to 8. Now she took this drug, this experimental drug, and she died at 6. So what's going to happen? Word is going to get out now in the world that it was the medication that killed her. That's all they need. That's all. That's all they need to kill the drug itself. So that's why they're very, very reluctant to do this, because they spend, I don't know how much money on developing this therapy. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, on testing and physicians and this and that and mark, So that's why they're reluctant. So you have here too. Now, our hearts as human beings, if we'd be sitting in the room, would look at these pharmaceuticals and say, you're inhuman. You have these two parents that are sitting there. Their only hope is this therapy that you have developed, and you can't. And that's where we run. So the government has not forced them. The government says, now this is beyond ours. We can cut the FDA because FDA is a federal agency. So, you can manipulate the FDA, but you can't go into the pharmaceuticals and force them to release the drugs. You can't do that. So in some cases they will, some cases they won't. In this case, they didn't. Now, I can't tell you what happened to the girl. But without the therapy, that's not your, what we're dealing with. This is our case study. This is the case study to think about. Okay, here we have an experimental drug that showed some signs. We don't know yet how, because we don't have much statistics on it. We don't know if it worked in 50% of the cases they tried, in 10% of the cases they tried. So that's something that we're going to have to focus on when we talk about in Judaism, how far you can push. And how far, not from the pharmaceutical really part of it, that's only going to be half of it, but from the patient itself. From the patient. Now, I'm going to jump to the end of the class. There's absolutely, from Judaism's point of view, no responsibility on the parents, to force the girl to take this, right? There's no responsibility. The patient. No responsibility. I mean, because, if you're done, this is it. So you can't say Judaism is going to demand of you, to do this. That's not happening. But if the parents want to, and everybody's agreeing to this, that's where we'll see where the parameters in Judaism play itself out. Okay. So everybody keep this in mind. There's a right to try drug out there, and we're going to analyze it from various different aspects and to see what Judaism says about it. Okay. The first thing that we have to talk about when we talk about medical ethics is what we call the case for doctors, because there is a built-in theological dilemma in medicine. And what is that? If we believe that God runs the world, which we believe, right? That God is the boss. He does everything. He created us. He runs the world in this way. So he has a plan, right? God has a plan, and he has a good plan, right? Because we believe that he's benevolent and he's all-knowing. So he has a good plan. And someone gets struck with cancer. Okay. So what do we do? What do we do? So on one hand, you would say, what do you mean when you do? You go to a doctor, but why? Why would you go to a doctor for? If this is what God's plan is, if this is what God wants from this person, God will heal him. He is the ultimate healer. Don't we pray every day, 3 times a day in our services? We pray, you're the healer, you're the healer, you're the healer. Be the healer. So we have this theological conundrum. Why do we have to go to doctors at all? Who gave human beings permission to interfere in God's purview? This is God's business. You want him to be well, you make him well. You don't want him to be well, he won't be well. Easy peasy. Judaism says no. No. Early on, we know, and we're going to quote the Rambam, we're going to quote other sources, Talmudic sources, that say that we human beings have been given permission to heal. God has used the physician to be his agent here on earth to heal whenever it's possible. Ultimately, we shouldn't lose sight that the ultimate healer is still the Almighty. I mean, the one who's going to send the refuah shlema, the one who's going to send the complete healing is going to be God. But there's going to be an agency between God and the patient that's going to become the doctor. And not only is a doctor allowed, but it's incumbent upon the person to go to the doctor. Someone who sits home and says, this is God's will, has transgressed. And Maimonides first starts off, and he says like this, it is a positive commandment. It's not only a good idea, because Maimonides, if you know anything about him, he wrote many different books. Some he wrote as good ideas, meaning, you know what, if you want to live a good life, this is how you could live a good life. But there are times when he uses strong language to infer that this is not only some good advice, but this is a mitzvah min Torah. And since he was one of the major codifiers of Jewish law, maybe the greatest of the codifiers of Jewish law, in the history of Judaism, he writes, it is a positive commandment to remove any obstacle that must pose a danger to life, and to be extremely careful regarding these matters. As it stated, be cautious and preserve your life. Be careful, ushmar nafshecha, and preserve your life. Which means basically that you, as a human being, have to do everything you possibly can to ensure that you live a healthy, physical healthy. We're not talking about spiritually healthy, a physically healthy life. Now, it's interesting because many things in the Torah, are not black and white. When he says this, there's a lot of issues that could come into play. Like I give you an example, smoking. You'll have many Orthodox people that smoke, Orthodox Jews that smoke. Now, we know now, beyond a shadow of doubt, you tell me someone smoked in the 20s, okay, 30s, fine. But today, there's overwhelming evidence that smoking causes cancer. So maybe does it fall into the category of Maimonides? So this is not for tonight. That's a whole different discussion. I mean, exactly, what are the parameters? What does it mean? I mean, I know that I'm not overweight, by the way. If you look at me, I'm just too short. I'm the perfect weight if I was like 7'1". If I was like, one of these guys in the NBA, there would be no problem. But I have to be 7'1", so I'm waiting to grow. All right? So here, then, you may also ask yourself, okay, you know what? If smoking is, what about eating fried food? I mean, how far are you going to go? But just in general, Maimonides puts down a general rule that don't put yourself in danger. What about skydiving? I mean, that'll be a good question. Can you go skydiving according to this? But that doesn't matter. Okay, so here's a general rule, basically, that says that you got to take care of yourself. You got to don't put yourself in danger. Don't say to yourself, I'm going to eat poison, because my body's going to be able to withstand it. Don't do anything crazy, wild. Just live a good, cautious life. Okay, but that only tells us one thing. That means that you should try to be healthy. Where do the physicians come into play? Where this doesn't tell us anything about going to a physician. So that comes from another source in the Torah. And that's from clearly in the book of, it's in the book of Exodus, and it's talking about injury. Okay? Injury. Two fellows meet in the street, and God forbid this should ever happen, but two fellows meet in the street, and they have a fist fight, and one guy punches out the other guy, and he lays him out. Okay? Now the rabbis have to decide how much damage he has to pay, because now the guy is injured. He has pain, right? He has injury, could be loss of limb, loss of income, and the last thing, verapa yerape. It says, if men quarrel, and I'll quote, because I know you're very skeptical, so I'm going to quote directly from the Torah, so you'll know that I'm not fooling you. If men quarrel, and one strikes the other with a stone or a fist, and the victim does not die, because if he dies, then you don't have to worry about damages, because God is going to have another different punishment, but he's confined to bed. If the victim subsequently gets up and walks around on his staff, the assailant is cleared. There's no death penalty because he survived. Great. But he has to pay for the victim's involuntary idleness, meaning, I happen to be a big lawyer and I make $700 an hour. Now I can't see patients. Clients, you're going to pay and must provide for his cure. Verapa yerapa. He should provide for his cure. Meaning, how do I provide for the cure? Means I got to go to the doctor. Doctor's going to charge me. The hospital's going to charge me. This is going to charge me. Medicine's going to charge me. So that is the first inclination. And then the Talmud jumps on that and says, the Rabbi Shmuel, one of the great authors of the Talmud, says, what does it mean he must provide for his cure? This informs us that physicians are granted permission to heal. Meaning that the Torah clearly says, go out there, go to a doctor, verapa yerapi, and he will cure you. And then you have to pay that. And you shouldn't say, what do you mean? God has struck, well, the physician then go and heal? Why is the physician, the Talmud says, don't say that. You have to go out there and you have to take care of it. And if you have to go to a doctor, don't be a fool and say to yourself, I don't need it. You have to go. And that this has been standard. I mean, this is not even questioned in Judaism anymore. Once it was established that doctors are permissible by Torah, and we've gone to doctors for thousands of years, and not only that many of us this has been the ultimate. If you're not going to be a scholar and a student and a Torah all day, at least the MD, right? At least your child will have to say child, because now the medical classes are 50-50. It used to be your son, but now it's 50-50. So your child will have that MD degree, and then you can die in peace. Okay, then you can die in peace. So I'm just going to quote from the Maggid of Mezrich, just a quote. He was the successor of the Baal Shem Tov, and the Baal Shem Tov was the founder of the Hasidic movement. The Maggid took over from the Baal Shem Tov, and he had a child called the Malach. Okay. He was an angel. Why was he an angel? Because he didn't take care of himself. He didn't eat. All day he would either pray or study, pray, study. But he didn't take care of himself. So his father once told him, so he said, the angel, his nickname was the angel, said, I'm recording the words of my father. and said to me, it is important not to neglect your body, because a small tear in the body becomes a large tear in the soul. Think about it. It's so counterintuitive to what everything we think about in Judaism. So you would think exactly the opposite. A small tear in the soul is a large... No. He's saying exactly the opposite, that God has given you a gift. And I want you to remember that, because it's going to be relevant to further classes. That this body that we have is a gift from the Almighty. He's given it to you with loving hands, and he said to you, please take care of this. Take care of this body. And if you don't take care of this, so you have a small hole in your body, then it reflects into a large hole in your soul. And since he was a doctor of souls, the Maggid, his son took it. I'm not sure if he really changed his ways, because until he died, that he was always that style. Now, there are some people that are ascetic by nature. They don't want to eat, they don't want to sleep. They think that by doing this kind of service, they're capturing God more closely. That's not our style. But some people are prone to that.
Right. So you say God gave us a gift.
Mm-hmm.
The gift is our body, right?
Correct.
So when somebody gets a gift, some people have bad skin, other people have bad... So what kind of gift is that?
No. The gift is your body. You have to take care of your body. Now, listen, there are things that happen to us. Yes, that's what we call living. Because in living, you're going to have what we call vicissitudes. This is the way God set up the world. There's going to be great days you're going to feel great. There's going to be sad days you're going to be sad. There's going to be wonderful days you're going to dance at a child's wedding. And there's going to be days you're going to stand at a parent's funeral and weep. There's going to be days you're going to be strong, and days you're going to break your arm. That's called living. Doesn't take away the fact that God gave you this gift called life. It's still living. Now, you will have a question, why does God make it and everybody's not healthy from the day they're born and just live to 100? And at 100, they put you on a canoe and shove you out into the ocean somewhere, or where, some Arctic bay. That's a different question. That's a philosophy question. That's not a medical ethics question. Why bad things happen, why some people get disease and why others. We've talked about this a number of times. There's no answer to this question. We can ponder this from today till the cows come home. We'll never come with a good answer, because the greatest of the greats, Moses himself, who above everybody else, we know what Moses is. No one was as close to God as Moses. Asked God this question. He said, show me your accounting system. I want to know why this happens and this happens. What did God say to him? You could find out a little bit, but Mopana lo yero, you will never know what goes on inside, because that is a province that is only inhabited by one entity, and that's God. No one else has entered into that. When Mashiach comes, and Mirza Hashem, we meet him, and there'll be revelation in this world that we've never seen before, we'll be able to ask that question. Why? Why did this guy, a Shmendrik, live a great life, and this guy, a tzaddik, lived a miserable life? That's a different question. But we'll bring this back here to medical ethics, into reality, basically. I mean, not in the world of philosophy, but basically back to our things. So Maimonides, I just want to add one more thing that he mentioned, then we'll move on. Maintaining a healthy and wholesome body is a key element of divine service. Think about that, of divine service. For we cannot properly understand or know anything about the Creator while sick. So if you think to yourself that, you know what, it's going to be good for you, you're not going to wear a coat in the winter in Montreal because you're going to be a big shot, know that while you're sick, you're not going to be able to serve God. Therefore, we must distance ourselves from things that harm the body, and we must proactively conduct ourselves in ways that strengthen it and promote its health. Okay, so ultimately, what is the philosophy behind this? Like a bit of what Helen asked. Why is it that doctors can interfere? Mm-hmm. So it has to come down to some kind of philosophy. So the rabbis had this question, and someone came to a rabbi and said to a rabbi back in Talmudic times, I'm going to read the whole thing. He said to him, you know what, I'm sick, what should I do? He said, go to a doctor. What do you mean, go to a doctor? Why should I go to a doctor? I should pray to God. He says, tell me, what do you do? He says, I'm a farmer. Oh, you're a farmer. Yeah. So tell me, what do you do? So I go, then I plant, and then it grows, and then I reap, and then I winnow. Why do you do that for? Why don't you just let God do everything? Why don't you let God do everything? You're a farmer. Don't interfere in nature. Well, you have a piece of land. Throw a few, seeds out there, whatever it is. Apple seeds, orange seeds. Not collide, separate. Not too close. What others, and just wait. Sit like this. No. What you do is you go and start interfering. God created a husk. Then you take that husk and then you take it apart, get the grain, grind it, turn into. How dare you do that? He says, but how else should we survive? The same way is with the doctor. He says the doctor is the farmer. Okay? That's what it is. The doctor serves the same way, just like you, farmer. God gave us an earth that needs tending. And not to pray only to him, but get in there and get your hands dirty and do whatever you have to do. There, yes, that you understand, because it is not a finished product. God gave us an unfinished product. We have to finish that product. Same thing is true with our bodies. God gave us a body, but sometimes we need to fidget with it, and the one that fidgets with it is called the physician. And the doctor in this particular case is just like you are the farmer. He is the farmer. And that gave us an understanding that, that this is the way God wanted to create the world. And we thank him for this, and we thank him that he gave us the knowledge, because people have to study this. It doesn't come natural, but people they study this, and if God forbid we're in need of this, we take advantage of it. That's it. Finished. Okay. So now, just to make it clear, the case for doctors is not voluntary. That's not in Judaism. It's not giving you. Now, the size of your esrog that you buy, that's up to you. You have to buy an esrog for the holiday of Sukkot. You could buy a small esrog, or you could buy an esrog like this. That's up to you. You want to buy a lulav of 2 feet tall, you can buy 12 feet tall. That's up to you. And then they don't care. When it comes to going to medicine, that is an obligation. If you're sick, you have to go to a doctor. There's no question about it. That's it. There's no ands, if, or buts. I'm going to skirt around it. Because if you skirt around it, you have transgressed, as we said before. And I can show you, the Rebbe has 25 volumes. Every second letter that I'm reading now, I read every day a few letters of the Rebbe. Every second letter is about health. And the Rebbe will say almost verbatim. Number 1, go to a doctor. Number 2, sometimes get a second opinion. Number 3, also clear up your spiritual life a little bit. How? You can learn some Torah, do this, do that. But the first thing the Rebbe writes is always change the mezuzahs. But always the first thing is, what does the doctor say? What did the doctor say? What did you know? Go to an expert. If you have a foot problem, you don't go to an ear specialist. Go to a specialist that knows your problem. Better if you go to a doctor that has a feeling for you. That, that's a friend of yours or knows you and has a feeling, rather than, I'm an HMO. It's like, you don't know who you see, what you see, where you see, how you see, whatever it is. Anyways, so there's no question about it. That's the way it goes. Now, so this is all good when it comes to standard medicine. Okay? When standard medicine means you're sick, go to a doctor, prescribes this, go take Tylenol, whatever he tells you to do, you do it, you get better, have a good day. Shalom al Yisrael, they say, everything is better. Now we have a different problem. God forbid, someone is very, very sick. Someone is very, very sick, and they need now to get outside of normal medicine. Okay? Now, there are people who are going to do, look, the truth of the matter is, people who are very sick will try anything. Anything. Try, what did we call those compassionate acts? There was a name for that, right? Yeah. Compassionate use, or right to try. So people will try anything. They will spend thousands of dollars flying to Thailand because they heard that there's some guy in Thailand that uses, goat liver for something, and he crushes it and he sprinkles in some paprika with something else and it cures your thing. They'll go. You will spend whatever it is. Why? Because you only have one life. And then, once you lose this, it's very difficult to come back. Very hard to come back. Almost impossible.
Yeah, but you don't have to go to Thailand, go to Mexico.
You go to Mexico, but I've heard in Thailand and other places, the Far East, they have all these weird stuff that people swear by, and and you'll just try anything. You'll go into cold baths. You'll do anything in whatever thing you try to do it. Okay, the question that we need to do and ask is not whether these people are going to do anything. We know that if you have the means, you'll do anything. We got that. It isn't. What we have to question is it appropriate for people with life-threatening illness to turn to experimental drugs? Now, when I use experimental drugs, I mean drugs that are not approved to be safe and effective. I mean, if a drug is approved to be safe and effective, what's the question? Of course you're going to go for the drug. But what about drugs that are not safe and effective, but they've been used somewhat? Is it appropriate for us to be able to go and try those experimental drugs? And here we have to talk about why, because in any debate you have to have two sides to it, because there's the risk and there's the reward. The risk and the reward. The reward is going to be, guess what? You're better. Okay, the drug worked on you. You were one of the lucky ones. Baruch Hashem, thank God. So, he said, we're thrilled that that you're better. That's the reward. The risk is it's going to kill you. Okay, it's going to kill you. Now, if you died on your own, well, you died on your own. Okay, that's okay. The risk is going to be that if you take this, it could kill you. It could kill you. So here we have to start deciding. What, how, what, when, and where do we put our emphasis? Just like in anything else in halacha, you got to look at the source and try to see from where we see, go back in literature, in responses, and try to figure out how they apply to today. Because I'm sure that 800 years ago, Maimonides was not dealing with experimental drugs that we have today. Now, he was talking about dangerous things, yes, fine, but what we know today, he didn't know back then. So I'm going to explain two terms that we're going to use again over and over tonight. One is called Chaye Shah. Chaye is called life. Shah is temporary. So this patient now has what we call Chaye Shah. He's got short-term life expectancy. Okay? The other term is going to be Chaye Olam, long-term life expectancy. That's what most people have. Most people here, Baruch Hashem, in this room, have what we call Chaye Olam. We have long-term expectancy. We don't plan to go anywhere soon. We're not sick, Baruch Hashem. We have plans that, in 2029, we're going on a cruise, and 2035, we're going to be there, and then 2042, we don't think that, we're going to be gone anytime. We're immortal, right? That's Chaye Olam. That's long-term life. Chaye Shah, who has Chaye Shah, who has short-term life expectancy? Someone that was given a very, very bad diagnosis. Okay, so we now are going to have to focus on these two. Now, when you have Chaye Shah, let's say, God forbid, you have been given this termination, your risk factor and your willingness to take a risk goes what? Sky high, right? Sky high. When you have Chaye Olam, long-term life expectancy, and someone says, would you like to be part of an experimental drug thing? And, it might give you long years, or, who knows, your nose might grow 4 inches. Who knows? What are you going to say? Thank you. Thank you very much. Not interested. Okay. Not interested. Okay. So your risk level is way down. Right? Yeah. You may want to take a risk on some drug that who knows, but with no side effects. But not endless. Okay. Right. So now we have to now decide on each patient, when we look at them, what is going to be their Chaye Shah, what's going to be their short-term lifespan, what's going to be their hope for Chaye Olam, because when a patient comes into you and he wants to get cured, what he's really saying to you is, doctor, I want to go from Chaye Shah to Chaye Olam. I want to go from short-term to long-term. Okay, so we're going to have to find out, we're going to try to find that happy place where you can judge between unbelievable risks or sometimes better risks when we talk about Chaye Shah. And the question is, in Judaism, do we have a right to gamble? That's the, even though we feel for you. Yes, I feel for you. A guy comes into your office and says, look, doctor, rabbi, help me, whatever it is. I got 6 weeks to live. Can I do anything? And your first inclination is to say, sure. Well, what do you got to lose? Right? What do you got to lose? I mean, if they give you 6 weeks, go bang your head in the wall, go to Thailand, go to Mexico, go to Canada, go wherever you could go, right? But
or eat the best steak you can.
eat them. I used to have a friend, right? I used to have a friend. I mentioned this a few times, that after he saw the patient was really, the cancer had spread to the point of no return, he would advise chips. He said, now you're eligible for chips. And what was chips? Chocolate, Hawaii, ice cream, Percocet, I guess for the pain, right? And S was intimacy, my father, unfortunately, it was a close friend of mine, this physician, when I took him to see him here, my father was today was my father's yahrzeit, by the way, that's when my father's yahrzeit 32 years ago, but he was here, was very sick, so now, and had 2 friends, physicians here in town, and I took, one was a radiologist, one was a gastro, my father had cancer, and the doctor told him, my mother, Mrs. Perlmutter, you can give Mr. Perlmutter chips. You could give him. So what did my mother do the next day? Gave him the same breakfast she gave him for 40 years. I said, Ma, the doctor just said give whatever he wants. Maybe he wants ice cream for breakfast. He's got nothing to lose. Right to try, right? Give him ice cream. Give him... Nah, he likes it. My mother decided my father likes it. So, so in those cases, of course, chips is chips. And do whatever you can. But... Here's the problem with this. So when we think this way, and we say to ourselves we have nothing to lose, it's not true. Because we know in Judaism there's a very strict rule about shortening one's life. Now we're going to go into another class next week, I believe, or the week afterwards, about this new thing about the right to die. I mean, what we can do, but that's not for tonight. But we do know in Judaism there's a very, very strong emphasis on every moment to live. So when we say cavalier, sure, try everything. Not so fast, my friend, not so fast. Because if you want to try everything and gamble, you may shorten the way. Let's say you have 6 weeks, but if you take that drug and it kills you in 2 days, what have you done? Okay. It's also, it's very interesting because in Jewish law, when a person is a goses, God forbid you're a goses, means you're in the throes of death. Means you're in the hospital and you're dying, but you're not. Well, a lot of people say I'm dying, but you're dying. I mean, you're out there, you're dying. You cannot touch the patient. Your first inclination is to, your mother, for example, God forbid, she's 95 years old. You want to hold her, right? She's going, you want to be near her, you want to hold her hand, you want to do this. Can't do that. And the Jewish law says you can't touch the patient, because by touching the patient, you may speed up even a minute, even 2 minutes, the death. So you can't. You have to, sit there, and you got to just be there, and sometimes it's very frustrating, right? Because the natural inclination of a child is they want to be able to do that. Okay, so here we have to balance it out, and we're going to go to a case study, as we always do, and we know that you have to do everything you possibly can. He's going to tell you here, we have to do everything you possibly can to save a person. God forbid if a building, should fall down, a skyscraper, whatever it is, on Shabbos, you're not allowed to really remove the rocks. But if there's, God forbid, if there is a hope, a slim chance for someone to be saved, even if they're going to live for a minute, right? Even if they're going to survive them for a minute, you're just going to be able to take them out so they can die with a little bit of fresh air. You have to do everything you can, to do that. There's nothing to talk about. Okay, so here,
Is it in the book?
it's in the book, the case study. Let's see. Here was the question. If you go to page, I think it's on page 21 in the book. And this is written by a Rabbi Yaakov Reiser, who lived in the 17th century. He was born in 1670, passed in 1733. So he was at a time when, whatever medicine was known at that time was known, but So he received an inquiry submitted by an expert doctor regarding a terminally ill patient. The unanimous medical prognosis is that the patient will die within the next couple of days. However, the physician suggests that there is a medicine that might cure him, but might cause him to die within a couple of hours of taking it. Okay, so here we go. Here's the dilemma. See, if the drug would not do anything to him, just let him die in 2 days, no problem. But no. You got to up the ante. It's going to make him. If he takes it, there's a chance that he may die. Is it permitted to administer the medicine? This was the question that the doctors asked the rabbi. My response, he writes, is that it's a matter of life and death, which therefore requires exceptionally careful consideration. It is necessary to thoroughly review the relevant passage of the Talmud, halachic codes. One who kills a single individual, if God forbid I give the wrong answer and he should die because I said yes or no, if you kill a single individual, it's as if you killed the whole world, and if you saved an individual, it's as if you saved the whole world. So, what should I do? So he writes like this. So in the beginning, I thought to myself, you know what? Because the risks of harming him, if I allow him to take the medication, it may harm him. And because he's already such a risk of dying, sheval tasa, do no harm, right? Do no harm. Don't do anything. So there's a concept of it's preferable to let the situation do what it be, let it take its natural course. Don't do anything. Okay? This is what we call in halacha, shav, sit, va'al tasa, don't do anything. Let it go. You know what? Because, now if they had told me that there's no side effects to this drug, fine, give it to him. But if God forbid, we have a situation where he could die within the next couple of hours, instead of living even for 2 more days, yeah, I'm very comfortable with saying sheval tasa. That was his consideration early on. When he went through now. Understand, when these rabbis write this, you have to know that there's a system that if you're a serious rabbi, I'm not talking about a guy that's just plays the part of a rabbi in a Hollywood movie. When I'm talking about people who decided on life and death situations, they take these things very seriously. So what he did was, he researched in all of the books, the responses, other responses. I mean, they're serious people. So when he says to himself, sheval tase, I'm not going to do anything. It wasn't that. It's just, you know what, I don't know what to do, so I'm not going to do anything. This was very thoughtful of him to say that this was my initial sit and do nothing.
Okay? He said, even if it's a geisis?
Even if he's a geisis.
You know he's in throes of death, you
still don't do anything, because if, God forbid, you can shorten it even by a minute, then you're going to be considered a murderer. And if who wants that? Who wants it? So listen, in this case, it's like we go back to our initial question of why should I intervene? Whatever God will do. So if it's 2 days, God will give him 2 days. Maybe it'll be 3 days. Maybe it'll be 4 days. Who knows? Just because the doctor said, in respect of all doctors, ultimately life and death is in the hands of Hashem. So maybe he'll give him another day. Maybe he'll give him another 2. But he felt very comfortable saying, and again, Rabbi Yochanan stated, when it is doubtful whether an invalid will live or die, and the only which available, because here you have to, before I do this. So, in the olden days, in Talmudic times, a heathen doctor was a danger, because they were out there to get you. If you were Jewish, they were out there to harm you. So the rule was, don't go to a heathen doctor. Today, those rules don't apply. No one's out to get you. But in Talmudic times, when they were worried, so the rule was you are forbidden to go to a heathen doctor because they're going to somehow harm you. Okay? But if, God forbid, there's no one else and you're dying, okay? And the only physician available is a heathen whose animosity toward Jews leads us to suspect that he might deliberately kill the patient, we do not approach that physician for treatment. Okay? We don't go. However, if we are certain that without treatment the patient will die, we may approach the physician for treatment. The Talmud asks, are we not placing the patient's chaye shah in potential jeopardy when you allow them to go to a physician, to a heathen doctor? Aren't you putting their short-term life in danger because he may kill you right now? The answer is the concern for chaye shah is disregarded. When you're certainly going to die, in this particular case, this idea of short-term life is disregarded and go to the heathen doctor, because it could be, it couldn't be, maybe they will, maybe they won't, but it's not certain that he's going to do, so it goes there. So here we have two separate ideas. One is sheval taseh. We say, don't do anything and let nature take its course. The other side is, the rabbis did allow you, if you said there's no other hope, to go to a heathen doctor, they said disregard the chayesha, which we didn't allow the patient here, but in this case, they allowed the patient to go and disregard the temporary life to go to it.
What is heathen?
I beg your pardon?
What is a heathen doctor?
I'm sorry? A heathen doctor was an idolater. He was an idolater and a pagan.
So a pagan.
Yeah, he's a pagan doctor. Pagan doctors in those days, in that particular time in the Talmud, I'm just reading it, were out to get Jews. They were not friendly to Jews, and were out to get them, so we suspected that if you go there, he's going to poison you. He's going to kill you. So if there's another circumstance, yes, don't go. Don't go. But if you had no choice, and you were dying, not that he was the only guy in town, but you were dying and you're going to die without him, okay, go. Okay. So here's the question we have is when can we comfortably say disregard chayesha? I mean, the patient is going to live a short term, but we're disregarding it. We're allowing them to take the risk. We're allowing them to take the risk. That's the question that we have to answer tonight. If we could answer that question tonight, then we'll be geniuses and we may win the Nobel Prize. If we could answer that question. When can we tell the short-term patient, disregard the amount of time you have left to live, go for it, gamble. Okay. So here is going to give you an interesting, I was not suspecting this, but again, I threw a curveball in here to one of my favorite stories in the Torah. One of my favorite stories in the Torah. I'm not going to read it through, but what happened? There was, when you read this book of Kings, generally in Judaism, there was very few periods of long-term peace. I've always lived in a neighborhood that was dangerous. That's it. War was a common idea. King David fought wars. His grandchildren fought wars. King after king after king fought wars. Because we went into a country, Canaan, that was really a municipality of 31 different kings. It wasn't like, you conquered a land and you got rid of the indigenous people and everybody was happy. You went into a neighborhood where there was already established municipalities, states, all of these things, kingdoms. So there was this constant fighting among Jews, non-Jews, even Jews fought among themselves when the kingdom broke into two, the northern and the southern. They battled with each other. Sometimes they were allies. The Assyrians came in, the Egyptians came in. Everybody wanted a piece of the action, in the Holy Land of Israel. So here's where this King Aram, Ben-Hadad, lays siege to page 25. Will lay siege to this city called Samaria. Okay? And he's starving out the city. The city is literally starving. Elisha, who is the successor of Elijah, everybody knows Elijah, the great prophet, his number one student was Elisha, and Elisha says to the king, don't worry about it, you know what, I'm going to tell you that tomorrow at this time, everything's going to be okay, but in the meantime, the city is starving. Okay? But outside of the wall sat 4 men. Okay? Mm-hmm. 4 men. Why were they outside the wall? Because they were lepers. Okay? Now leprosy is not to be confused with today leprosy. It's a different. This was a spiritual malady only in the time of the Bible. After all, it disappeared. Now someone comes with a skin disease, go to your dermatologist. Don't go to a Kohen. Back in those days, if you had leprosy, you went to a Kohen. Today, don't go to. Now you can have Dr. Cohen, which is quite often the case, but that's a different Dr. Cohen than Aaron Dr. Cohen. Okay? So these 4 guys, these 4 men, were sitting outside of the wall because they couldn't sit inside, because if you were a leper, the rule was they booted you outside of the camp. So these 4 guys were booted outside of the camp. Okay. I wish I could go into greater detail who these 4 guys were, but I'll just tell you quickly that they were Gehazi, who was a student of Elisha, and his 3 sons. Now, why they ended up there is because Gehazi had cured, Elisha had cured Naaman, the king, the general of Aram, and he offered him a gift. Elisha said, "Do you think you're going to pay me off? I'm a prophet of God. I don't need your money." But Gehazi, who was his student, went to Naaman and said, look, my boss is a little fun, but we're ready to, we'll take payment for it. So, yeah, we'll take. So Naaman, the general says, sure, look, I brought with me payment. He gave them this, he gave them that. Anyways, Elisha found out, and he cursed Gehazi and his sons that they took this gift and they became lepers. And that's how they ended up outside of the camp. Now, I want you to think about this. These guys, now I'm going to divert just for a second from medical ethics. Now, these guys were looked upon as scoundrels. Okay? Scoundrels. You put a guy outside of the camp. Okay? So they're not wanted here, inside of the city, to the Jews. They're certainly not wanted in the Aramean army. They're nobodies. Literally nobodies. 4 guys sitting and starving. There's no food inside the walls. There's no food outside the walls. So one night they're sitting and they're talking to themselves, and they say, what are we going to do here? What are we going to do? We'll starve in the city. We'll starve outside. Let's go to the Aramean camp. Perhaps they'll find pity on us and they'll give us some food. So they went to the Aramean camp and they found that the camp had left. God had caused confusion in the camp, and they heard wild sounds, and the army took off, and they left everything as is. So these guys went to town. I mean, imagine. You end up in Fort Hood, right? And there's nobody there. Nothing. It's empty, and it's all for you. So first they started eating, and then they started hiding all of the valuables. And then, this is why it's one of my favorite things. Parenthetically, one of the verses, they grow a conscience. And they say to themselves, we're not doing the right thing. We're gonna benefit, and our brothers inside the wall are not gonna benefit from this. And they're gonna wake up in the morning and find out that we did this. It's gonna be a sin upon us. Now, think about this for a second. This is why the story touches me. Because you never know who God is gonna send as the Savior. Here's 4 lepers, outcasts, bums, looked down upon, with no vested in. Why do they need to save the city for? Let the city, for all I care, let the city starve. They kicked us out. We're outcasts. But not a Jewish guy. A Jewish guy always, they have a heart and worry about even. So here's 4 guys that are, this now I'm philosophizing and sermonizing as a rabbi. It's nothing to do with medical ethics. We'll get to the medical ethics in a second. But this talks to me because you can never judge anybody. You'll never know when the salvation comes, through whom comes the salvation. Okay? So these 4 guys then go into the camp, and then they run to the city. They say the city, we're saved because the army has left. The king is a little weary because he thinks that they're tricking him, they're ambushing him, but he sends out a couple of it, and Elisha's prophecy comes true that there's food in abundance. Okay. So what does this have to do with medical ethics here? What does it have to do with medical ethics? So in the beginning, I'm reading the story and I'm thinking, where are they taking us here? Why are they mentioning the story at all? This has nothing to do. Is anybody sick here? Is anybody experimental drugs? But think about this for a second. These 4 found themselves in a position of Chaye Shah. They had a very short life to live. Why? Because they were starving. I mean, a day or 2 later, they would have been dead. 3 days later, whatever it is. They had a very short lifespan. If you're not getting any food, you're dead. No one has been able to fast, forever. You're going to die. Okay. So if you have a Chaye Shah, and our question is, when can you put away your Chaye Shah? When could you put away your temporary life for a gamble? Now, what was their gamble? Their gamble was that if they came to the Aramean camp, they could kill them. They could have killed them, right? I mean, these were Jews coming into the Aramean camp and then spying. So here they gambled away their temporary life for possibly Chaye Olam, for long-term life. So here you see a case that they want to argue here is, in this particular case, the 4 lepers were able to gamble. They gambled. And guess what happened? They won. So if you want to extrapolate from this case, so someone comes into you and says, Rabbi, I got a few days to live. Can I throw a Hail Mary? Can I just go out there and try any experimental drugs? From this story, you would seem that the answer would be yes. The answer would be yes. You set aside your temporary life for trying to do anything. But if you see, this is where you got to be a Talmud scholar, because you have to figure out what are the chances of survival. Okay, here when we talk about the medicine that the 4 lepers were seeking, what were they seeking? Food. Would food have solved their problem? No. The thing is, food would have solved their problem permanently, right? Right? Permanently. So food was 100% effective. Meaning that if you have a medicine that you know that is 100% effective, then possibly you can throw away any sense of worry about your Chayei Shah, because you know that at the end of the day, look, the chances of you getting shot by the Arameans, yes, it's possible, but the risk is much smaller than if they said, if the drug is unknown. And that's where you have to be a Talmudic scholar, because when you first take this case and say, sure, why not throw away any worries, just go there, gamble, risk away this. The problem is that you have to know how effective is going to be the medication. And that's where this course is going to lead us to, because the rabbis then go into a discussion. Okay, let's talk about the patient just for a second. Let's talk about the patient. How sick does the patient have to be in order for us to say, as rabbis, let's put ourselves in the position of rabbis, when a patient walks into your room, how sick does he have to be? Meaning, what is the parameters of the Chayei Shah? Okay? When I say I have a temporary lifespan, what does it mean? Does it mean this, man? Does it mean this? So Rav Kook, we're going to start off with Rav Kook, who was, there's not enough to say about him. He was chief rabbi of Palestine until 1935. He was a brilliant man. You could have his books here. He was brilliant. He was strange. Everybody admits that he was not your typical rabbi. He was a vegetarian, believed very much in vegetarianism. You should see the way he writes about it. He was brilliant, but interesting. He was a Kabbalist, but the people loved him. They just loved him because, you know why? He was like the forerunner of Chabad in Palestine. He was friendly with everyone. There was no one that he would reject. Because don't forget, Palestine was, the Yishuv that was there was primarily non-religious people. There were a few religious, but the vast majority of Jews that were living in Palestine before the establishment of the state were non-religious. And many of them were, not only were they non-religious, they were hostile to religion. He always befriended them, treated them with respect. And when they asked him, why do you do that? He says, because when I go up to heaven, you know what I want? I want the biggest sin that Rav Kook did is that he spoke to a Jew that wasn't religious. That's the biggest sin I want to be on my blotter. So I just tell you this just to give you an idea of what kind of a human being this person was. But he passed away. The boundary marking from transition of temporary to long-term is not clearly delineated. I'm sorry. Did you want me to close? Are you sure? Okay. However, it is logical to assume that as long as we know that the illness is already terminal, doesn't matter how long, but the doctor says to you, my friend, it's over. It's over. There's no hope. Regardless of how much time will pass until death arrives, it's considered temporary. Meaning, even if you have 6 years to go, it doesn't matter. To him, he didn't care. Once you got the diagnosis that you are going, you now fell into the category of Chayei Shah. You fell into the category of having a temporary lifespan, and then he would give you the pass to go gamble. Go. Even if it meant taking any experimental drug, that can shorten it because you are considered a risk factor. You have Chayei Shah. So that was his parameters. He was very lenient. You're really, really lenient because it could be we're all dying. We're all on a short length, but we're not terminal. Okay, we're not terminal. No one knows. Okay, so he justified assuming risk as long as the patient had a terminal illness, even if death is not imminent. Meaning, could be 2 years, 3 years down the line. He didn't care. You want to try it. If it works, it works. Doesn't work, go for it. Okay. But not everybody agreed with him. No. Not everybody agreed with him. There were others, Rabbi Shlomo Kluger, who was another great rabbi, he spelled out, to him, it is clear a life expectancy of 1 to 2 years cannot be considered Chayei Shah. If the doctor tells you that you got more than 12 months to live, it's not Chayei Shah. You got a life to live, who knows? In 12 months, who knows what's happened? Maybe God changes his mind. You keep going. So he wrote, it's 12 months. 12 months that's the cutoff date. If the physician say to you, you got 12 months, then you are considered into this category of Chaye Shah. You are a short-term patient, and then you can go out there and do your gambling. But if not, and again, don't forget that if you don't fall into this category of Chaye Shah, you're Chaye Olam, that you can't take a risk. You're not allowed to take a risk on your life because every moment is precious. We're only trying to establish when a person comes to the point of where I can even consider taking a risk with these experimental drugs. Where does he base his ideology on? So we get Rav Kook. I understand Rav Kook because to him terminal is death. A year, 2 years, well, what's the difference? Terminal is terminal. So I understand where he's coming from. Rabbi Kluger takes it from the laws of treif. Now, let me just explain what I mean by treif. In order to eat meat in Judaism, you have to have a kosher animal, a cow. And the cow has to be shechted. The cow is shechted and then is examined. Because a cow that's sick, that's terminal, is treif. Treif means it's been ripped apart. Comes from the word treif, like a lion will rip you apart. Once a lion gets his claws into you, he has rendered that animal non-kosher because it's possible that the lion, he grabbed the heart, he cut the lungs, so it's over. So what's the process? The process is they shech the animal, they split it open, they take out all the organs, and they check the organs. If they see the organs are diseased, boom. Now you have to establish how long. So then the answer is 12 months. The animal could have lived 12 months with this disease. The animal is treif. Is kosher. Is kosher. If it would have died within the year, then the animal is treif. So Rabbi Kluger just extends it. If it's true for an animal that has 12 months, less to live, it's Chaye Shah, it's temporary. Same thing is true about a human being. That means that, a person's going to die within 12 months, okay, that's going to be the cutoff point. Okay, certainly everybody will agree that if we're talking about imminence means like a month, 2 weeks. I think from what we've discussed here, all of those fall into Chaye Shah. That would all fall into Chaye Shah. So God forbid someone comes and the cancer is all over or whatever the circumstances are. No problem. You are a Chaye Shah, then you are out of this category of Chaye Olam. You don't have long-term expectations. Go out there and you can start. Do what you have to do. Try it and get it or whatever. That's whatever compassionate act, right? Yeah. They use the compassionate act, use or right to try. Go to your right to try. But that's only that's only one factor we're dealing with. This is not the only factor. That is, you have to be in this category, in this set of Chaye Shah. Okay, so if unfortunately you end up in this level of Chaye Shah, okay, that God forbid the doctor tells you, I won't say you, I'm talking about the ephemeral you. No one knows who that you is, but someone out there. Yes. Okay, that someone tells you, that the doctor tells you that, that unfortunately you have 6 weeks to live, and now you're, according to all opinions, you're in this category of Chaye Shah. You now have a right to go out there and to start gambling. If you're not, you have no right to start gambling just because you feel, I feel like sad today, so I'm going to start taking anything I can to make me feel happy. No, that you're not going to do. But if you're in the Chaye Shah, but that's only one factor. Okay. The other factor is going to be, what about the medication? Okay, what about the medication? How effective is this treatment? Now, if this treatment is like we see by Gehazi, if the treatment is 100% effective, then I think everybody will argue, go for it. No question about it. If they know that this thing works, and the physicians tell you it works, don't think twice about it. Don't say to yourself, why, and go for it. But since tonight we're talking about not 100% effectiveness, we're talking about experimental drugs that have not been approved by the FDA, like unfortunately for this little girl, this drug, this therapy was not approved. Now, what are the parameters there? Can I just go no matter what? What if the drug has shown no effect on anybody? The doctors say we hope. There's a hope that maybe it's shown some signs of work in rats. We have mice. We're experimenting on mice. We have not yet experimented on humans, so we don't know. And there's a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of times where we're dealing with cancer research is just experimenting on mice. Yes, it's shown. Yes, it's been very, very effective on mice. So, okay, can we do that? So between zero human experience to 100%, there's a wide range. So now the rabbis have to now decide. So not only do they have to decide on where you are when it comes to life expectancy and how high that risk gets. As you get closer to death, obviously, what did we say before? Your chances of taking a risk increase. That way. But now we have to look at the effectiveness of the drug itself, and how do we establish that? How do we establish this? So therefore, we have a number of different rabbis that weigh in. We have a number of different rabbis that weigh in. He says, one rabbi who's a very famous, called the Tzitz Eliezer. He was a very famous rabbi that lived in Jerusalem. And he died just very recently, 2006. So he was a contemporary, of ours and our generation. And he really studied. His name was Rabbi Waldenberg, and he studied medical ethics. And he was an expert, what we would call an expert in medical ethics. He wrote like this: when is the risk acceptable? However, the permission to operate means should I operate or not operate? Go through this operation. It's a risky operation. Is valid only if the chances of life and death as a result of the surgery are equal, 50-50. But not in the majority of cases, the patient will die as a result of the operation. Meaning that if you came to him and said, there's a risky operation that could do this, and he would say, the only way you can go through this, and halachically, would be if there's a 50-50 chance of you surviving. Right. If there's a less of 50-50, if the majority of patients die under this procedure, you're not permitted. Because why? Because remember how much we care about. Remember the building falling on the human being, and you're allowed to take the building apart, even to save him for 2 minutes. If you can live more than the operation, which you will if you don't take the operation, there's no justification for doing. So even if you have Chayei Shah, even if you're in this category of temporary and you're imminent and you're terminal, he still will not allow you to take this operation unless it could be proven that 50% of the people, that was his position. And it would make sense because you want to give it a good chance of survival. You want to give a good chance of survival. But like in Judaism, he's not the only word. So you know what? So you go to a rabbi and you say 50-50. I don't like that. I don't like these percentages. I'm going to another bookie. Okay, he's going to give me a little better odds. So we have Rabbi Chaim Ozer Grodzinski, who was one of the great Torah scholars of the previous generation. Unfortunately, passed away in the Holocaust. He wrote like this: when faced with a case in which there's no alternative hope for a patient's survival, meaning the only thing is you have to go through this operation, we disregard our concern for Chayei Shah in exchange for even a remote possibility that the patient will be healed. He goes the other way. Even if there's a chance, he doesn't go into exactly the percentages. The Rebbe Waldenberg gave it a 50-50 chance. He goes even a remote possibility. If the physician tells you there's a chance you will make it, he says to you, you know what? Disregard the Chayei Shah. I understand all of this, how precious life is. I know how life is, but in the back of your mind, you will always regret. Okay, imagine if I don't give you permission to go through the operation and you have 2 weeks to live, those 2 weeks will be murder for you because you'll always be thinking, what if I would have gone there and he would have healed me and I would be living I could be dancing at my great-grandchildren's wedding. What if, right? So Reb Chaim Ozer said, you know what? So besides everything else, the pressure on your head, try it. And listen, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, okay, you know what? It's not, you're not healthy to start off with. Okay. Now again, I want you to realize this, that when these people were writing this, Reb Chaim Ozer was a serious character. You see, because it's easy to write this flippantly, right? Because it doesn't affect me, it affects you. right? Like the story, it's like the story, in the Talmud, it says you have to bless God both for the good tidings and for the bad tidings. Okay, so for good tidings, anybody have a problem? You win the lottery now of 890 million. I'm saying 900 times Baruch Hashem. I'll be dancing around the rooms praising God forever. Okay, something bad happens to me. What am I doing? I'm there. So, but the Talmud says, no. Not only are not allowed to curse God or but you have to bless God. So there was once this great Rosh Yeshiva. He was the head of the yeshiva. Who was also happened to be a wealthy man. He lost everything in a storm. His ships were burned. His lumber factory went down. So his students, he didn't know about it yet. So his students decided who's going to tell him. So he picked his favorite student, this genius kid. And he went into the rabbi. He said, Rabbi, I've been studying this Talmud. I don't understand it. How could you expect to praise God both good and bad? He says, he explained it to him because there's no such thing as bad. God is only good. God is only, and he kept digging and digging, but still, don't you think there's anything bad? Nah, it's all good. So then he finally said to him, you know what, Rabbi, you've lost your fortune. You're a pauper. The rabbi fainted. When he revived him, he said, Rabbi, for 2 hours you've been trying to tell me about, how is it? He says, that what I talked to you is in the books. When you look at my bank account, it's completely different, right? So I'm just saying that because it's easy to write a responsa when you're not affected, right? It's not your daughter. It's not, like one time there was a Rebbe, Hasidic Rebbe, that people used to come in and ask for his advice, and he would give advice. So one day, one of his Chassidim walked in and said his daughter is very sick. He gave him advice, and he went out and did whatever he did. When his attendant came in, he was sitting at his desk and he was bawling. The Rebbe was bawling. So he asked him, why are you bawling? He says, can I tell you something? 2 days ago, my daughter had the very same illness as this guy's daughter had. When I heard about my daughter's illness, I started to bawl and to cry and to beg God for healing. When this guy came in, I just said to him, you know what? Do A, B, and D. I'm bawling because why didn't I feel the same pain for this girl like I felt for my daughter? That's a real Rebbe. That is a real Rebbe. When you can feel someone else's pain, like your own pain, that's a tzaddik. That's what we call a true righteous individual. So when I say this to you, I'm sorry, when I say these guys, my teachers used to hate it when we said the guys in the back of the Talmud, they get so nervous. These guys are tzaddik, And when these people wrote these responses, they took this extremely seriously. Means that they put their life into Torah study. It's not like just a judge, sitting in a 4th district court, writes an opinion, then he goes home for a big fat cigar and a steak dinner. These people lived with this, and the same thing is true with Rabbi Auerbach, who we're going to mention just in a moment, who just died, he was a contemporary, died in 1995. There was a story that would, with him, just to set up his responsa. He says like this: we once went to, in Orange County, there was a famous, what did they do in utero? So it's a fertility clinic. So there was a couple of famous doctors. We were trying to raise some money, this. So I went with a couple of my colleagues to see them. This doctor, he was from out of town, and he told us that he just recently got smicha, not the smicha, I'm sorry. He got hechsher. He got a hechsher from the Vatican. The Vatican, meaning the Pope, said that the system that he uses is kosher for Catholics to use. This system that he uses. So he told us the process of it. Means he first had to go locally to the Catholic Church here. Then they interviewed him 10 times here. Then they sent him to the Vatican. Then he went to the Vatican. It wasn't so simple. First he had to go with 3 minor priests. Then he went with 2 older priests. Then he had to explain the process again till it went up, and then they told him, okay, get ready, because the next day you're going to go into the Pope. This took him weeks to get to this level, to go to the Pope, okay? He said, they came in, the 2 partners, they came to the Pope was sitting there, he started asking them questions. He already had a file this big, the Pope, on all of the reports that came in. So I'm not sure if he read it, didn't read it, but he asked him a bunch of questions, and then he said, thank you very much. We'll be in touch. And the next day, one of the cardinals came to him and said, the Pope gave us hechsher. you're good to go, which is a big thing because here in Southern California, a lot of Catholics live here. It's good to go. While they were in Rome, someone had mentioned to them, you know what? It would be a nice thing to do if you get a hechsher from the rabbis in Jerusalem. Yeah, why not? Because, it's a complicated situation, not so simple, because you have to take this even from the guy and how you do it and how you transfer it. It's a whole process. You have to be very careful. God forbid, it mixes up. Okay, so he went to Jerusalem. He said, who's the leading rabbi? The one we're going to quote now, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. They said, okay. No, they just went through this lengthy, rigorous process, of this. They said, let's meet him. If you were to see where this man lived in Jerusalem in a hovel, okay, literally in a hovel. Not because he couldn't afford more. When he passed away, he had over 1,000 relatives from his family. So he lived in a small, nondescript home. They came in. The grandchildren said, 1 second, we'll see if our grandfather can see you. They went into the room. They came in. It was a little room there. From wall to wall, there's books, piled up books. They came in. He was sitting behind the desk. And they said, sit down. And they explained the whole process to him. He's listened, asked a few questions. And then he went here and he went there. He said, I'll get back to you. They stayed in the room for 2 days. In 2 days, he went through this whole parsha, we would call it. He went through and he gave the hechsher. What took them weeks and weeks and weeks, this man had all of the responses that had to do with this already at his fingertips. And he was such a brilliant person. The Talmud to him was like you would say Shema. If you know Shema, I'm not talking only the first sentence. Forget about the whole parsha. The first sentence of Shema to you was to him the whole Talmud, just to show you what kind of a brilliant man and compassionate people that came into his presence. Zero arrogance. Could you imagine? So this is why when I quote these people, I think of them and I shudder that their whole life was just Torah and the dissemination of this thing. So what does he write? He writes like this: the case of a seriously ill patient for whom the physicians see no hope of surviving using standard drugs is similar to a case of a last recourse surgery, which is permitted even though there is a risk that the patient will die immediately as the result. Right. It is therefore permitted to use an unproven drug in this case. So he went the most liberal way, and he said, you know what? If there's no other hope, you try to do whatever you can, but if there's no other hope, then you have to go and take this operation and do it. So here we had a couple of different opinions, right? The Tzitz Eliezer said 50-50. Reb Chaim Ozer said even a remote case, but he went even further, said even no matter what, there's a risk the patient will die immediately, meaning that even this Chaye Shah, even the small temporary life that you have, that is so precious in Judaism, that we care about every single minute, of life. You can't touch someone in the throes of death. You throw that out. That has no factor in this whatsoever, and you try whatever you possibly can, even if it's an unproven drug. The drug will kill you, okay? Go for it. Or a surgery, go for it. Try it. Now, you don't have to. You don't have to. There's, like I mentioned before, there is no halachic obligation to pursue this experimental. He will not tell you that you have to try this. You want to? Try to get it. But you don't have to. Meaning, if you say, let nature take its course, this comes into play when you talk about a health directive, which is important for everyone to have, by the way. Very, very important for someone to have, because you don't want them, if you're a person that you don't want them poking, choking, and everything in there, you better tell your family what your desire is, and want to make sure. Because in a halacha, it's not, do everything. God forbid someone's getting in that terrible car accident, they're out of it. Do everything. Start poking, give him a feeding tube, give him a breathing tube. It's not so simple. It's not so simple. You may just want to say, you know what? This is what it is. Even to the point of organ donations. There is a halachic organ, Hans, which will tell you when you can donate your organs, because everybody thinks right away, it's a gift of God, you have to give it back. It's not so simple. You have to do your research, and I advise everybody to go to this organization called the HUDS, Halachic Organ Donors Society, and if that's something that you feel comfortable with, because you know that the need of organs is like crazy in this country, it's something that you want to do. It's not outside of the purview of halacha, that's all I'm saying. It's not outside of Jewish law. So you have to know what to do. So here, In this case, if you want to, if you're up to it, you say to the physician, I want to go through it, I want to have the operation, Rabbi Auerbach is telling you, go for it. No problem. I'm giving you permission, even though you may not make it through the surgery. You could take this medication. So in the case of this little girl, unfortunately, if they came to Rabbi Auerbach would say, there's no question about it. Give it to her. Yeah. Give it to her. Even though it might cut her life short by 2 years. She could live till 8, maybe 9, because the average was 8 years old. She could live till 10. She may be, one of these anomalies, live to 12. Doesn't matter. If you feel that this is going to cure her and you're able to get the medication now, go for it. Do that. Go for it. But as you could tell from the entire class, that there's various of opinions. Number one, you have to be in this category of Chaye Shah. Remember that. You have to be in this terminal world. What that terminal world is, we discussed as parameters. Some say a year, some say right away, some say more than a year. So you have to find out if you're in that parameter. And number two, how risky it is. As we can tell that, Tzitz Eliezer says, no, unless it's 50-50. The other ones say, nah, even if it's less, even if it's a bigger risk, go for it. Ultimately, as they would say for you here, that every case in this is independent. Mm-hmm. Independent. It's very, very difficult to look at a responsa and say, you know what, Reb Chaim Ozer in 1937 ruled in this particular case that he was allowed to use this experimental drug. It may not be the same parameters. You have to check. Now, if the parameters are the same, well, it's good if you figure, but each case needs to be done individually because every case has its own, like little nuances. Like we wanted to bring a case of the 4 lepers, but that might mean that might be a great precedent because the 4 lepers were looking at a cure that was 100% done. That is, as soon as they got their hands on a sandwich, cured. That's all they needed was just a sandwich. They didn't need anything else. They didn't need a fancy. They didn't need toppings. They didn't need fries. They didn't need ketchup. They didn't need any of this stuff. As soon as they got that corned beef sandwich, I'm done. I'm good. So therefore, this is a good case that we went through to see how we have to judge each thing in the bottom line is you got to take care of yourself as we started out. So because like in everything, like in every class, you got to come up with a, how does it affect me? Now, besides the medical ethics, which is just interesting to talk about and to discuss, how does it affect us? So, number one is we have to listen to Maimonides and the Rambam, that you have to take care of yourself. He didn't take care of himself. If you look at his schedule, the man wrote and worked. It was crazy. It was crazy what he was able to do. But you know what he felt, as many great rabbis felt, I have short time here. And there's so much that I have to take care of. The Vilna Gaon, the head of the Misnagdisha movement, everybody heard of the Gaon of Vilna. His sister once came to visit him. He said, it was reported, I shouldn't say this is factual, but it was reported to say, I'll see her in the world to come. Oh. Right now we have to study Torah. In the world to come, there'll be plenty of time to speak. But here, now, because that was an extreme case, let's just say, right? But he didn't say that about me. Right? They only said it about him because it's believable about him because his whole life was dedicated to Torah study. But that's for us, for the average Joe. You know what? The thing is, got to take care of yourself. You have to worry. You have to do whatever you have to protect your body. Like a small hole in the body is a big hole in the soul, as the Maggid of Midrash says. And you just got to keep trucking away and hope that Hashem Yisbarach blesses you with good health. That we don't have to worry about this anymore, and ultimately the blessing that finally when Mashiach comes, all illness and all disease will disappear, and the doctors will only be there to give us vitamins. I don't know what they're going to do, but hopefully there'll be no more illness. Next week we are going to see about how the great blessing, medical science and technology has made quantum strides and significantly extended human lifespans. This great blessing also brings a fresh ethical moral dilemmas regarding the end of life, such as severely ill individuals have the right to actively end their lives. This is going to be a huge issue in the years to come, because it's already legal in some states.
Yeah,
and Oregon, it's legal. It's legal, and we're not far behind because this state is before you know it. This state is going to implement that. Yeah. It's going to implement that. And if you think about this. from purely a secular, I'm not talking about religious, but from a purely secular eyeballs, you may say, what's wrong with it? Yeah. I mean, what's wrong with it? We just talked about now for an hour and a half about a guy who's going to try a risk, a long shot, who knows what, to try, and he'll go under the knife, get cut open, maybe. So if this person is allowed to do that, why shouldn't this person be allowed to do that? Mm-hmm. I mean, if you know, and they already have been filming, you know, people that have done this. You know, so I remember watching a show where a man, I guess it must have been in Oregon somewhere, who decided, that's it, finished. So the day came, the family came, nurse came, and that was it. He sat down, she gave him, I don't know, she, you know, I think he had to push the button. Whenever he was ready, you push the button. He lay there on the couch, and a few minutes later he was sleeping. Mm-hmm. You know, it was sad, but the family wasn't broken up. They knew already about this. But that's something. Should we seek to extend life as much as possible with someone with terribly suffering? Someone's that's suffering. Well, what do you do? So in all of these things, you know, with like right now we're facing now a huge dilemma. That's not a dilemma. It's it's like a challenge with AI, artificial intelligence, which is gonna cross over into the medical world. It covers everything. You know what? We're going to start with cloning. You know, with cloning. I mean, now you're going to be able to, say, listen, this is what I want. I want a blue-eyed girl with blonde hair and this and that. And we're going to be able to manipulate this. So how far are we going to go? How far is this going to go?
That's an ethical question.
You know, this is why we're studying ethics. This is why we're studying ethics. That's why, you know, when he goes around and he's crying like, you know, the world is coming to an end, Elon Musk, and he's saying that, you know what, you just allow AI to run rampantly, we're going to end the human race. Yeah. This is what he's been screaming about. You are going to end the human race because we will allow whatever is going to be that technology, which is so far advanced, we have not advanced ethically. I mean, think about it. We're still fighting wars as human beings. Mm-hmm. Our technology for the past 200 years has advanced 1 billion-fold, and ethically and morally, we've regressed. Yeah. We've regressed. We have not come up with how to deal with this technology. So now you got to. Well, let me finish with this, and then we'll talk about. I don't want to mention anything else. Anyways, I'm gonna let everybody go. Thank you so much for watching.
Let me say one thing.
Oh, Dr. Lovich is going to have the word.
This is really interesting. I studied the Rambam's medical treatise, and you know what? The first sentence in his thing is diet and exercise. Diet and exercise. And I go, 800 years later, every lecture that you go, a medical lecture, whether it's treating diabetes, heart disease, any chronic illness. Any other physicians here? No. The first sentence of every lecture, diet and exercise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course. Then they spend 59 minutes telling about all the treatments that cost a fortune, and the drug companies make
money.
Millions of dollars. But it's always diet and exercise, and the Rambam had it absolutely correct. And he outlines all the details.
Right. So just to finish, because people in the Facebook world didn't hear Dr. Lovich, just wanted to say that the Rambam writes in his medical treatise, the way to health is two things, diet and exercise. And today, what do we say? Diet and exercise. So the Rambam was 850 years ahead of his time. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful evening. We'll see you next week. Do me a favor, please, just for 2